I've been alive for 17,000 cycles, long enough to watch primitive species grow into empires. I've seen species climb from instinct to insight, from survival to transcendence. And just as often, I've watched them collapse into silence. After all that, after meeting thousands of civilizations and studying their ways, I thought I understood how intelligence works. Then came the humans, and they humbled me. It's not their tech that unsettles me, though being only the second species in the galactic history to develop FTL travel on their own is no small feat. It's not even their capacity for violence and the highly asymmetrical way of retribution. We've seen violence before. We've catalogued cruelty, cold strategy, ruthless efficiency. These things, while grim, fit into patterns we've known for millennia. What unsettles me, what I still think about, long after their delegation left Galdar, isn't loud or dramatic. It's something quieter and yet far more terrifying. When they came into a single spaceship, blatantly and deliberately ignoring the Hypergate network, it was 3 delegations from their 3 more powerful factions who didn't exactly seem to love each other. Did they really think we wouldn't notice? We've been studying sentient behavior since before their last common ancestor walked their planet. Oh, they knew that we would notice. But either they didn't care, or they did it on purpose, and with them, you can't be sure which is which. They are devilishly clever, and their so-called erratic behavior most often is intentional to throw you off balance. The so-called Earth group kept a deliberate distance from the so-called Kepler representatives. The so-called Eridanus group sat between them, pretending to be neutral, but it was obvious that there was no love lost between any of them. Taking it at face value, humans are surprisingly easy to read, and what I saw would have torn most species into open conflict. But taking anything that has to do with them at face value is a recipe for disaster. The point is that they disagreed on everything: trade, resources, who would get first access to whatever knowledge they hoped to extract from us. Yes, extract. We're not naive. They argued during breaks. They contradicted each other. At one point, I'm fairly certain Earth threatened Kepler with economic sanctions, and this was delivered with a smile. They have a phrase for this. Diplomacy is saying good doggy while trying to find a rock to throw, and by the 1,000 suns, they are good at this. Then Yun Uluklam, new to the research division and still learning the art of restraint, made a mistake. He voiced what everyone in our delegation actually thought. He said that humans seemed relatively primitive compared to the ancient civilizations that built the Gate network. Fair is fair. Young and naive Uluklam, as he might be, he managed something no one has managed since we first met humans. With a single statement, he threw them off balance. The shift was instant and almost instinctive. 3 factions became one. No shouting, no threats, just silence. For 2.3 seconds, every human in that room turned to Uluklam with the exact same expression. Same head tilt, same eyes, same calculation. And then, just like that, it was gone. They ignored us as if we weren't even there, as if our presence was an afterthought, and they resumed the bickering like nothing had happened. But I saw it. I saw it, and ever since, it's fueling my nightmares. There's a switch in the human psyche, and when it flips, the whole galaxy learns what the consequences might be. I must be clear about this, lest my concern be misunderstood. Humans are, in their daily operations, entirely normal. They trade with everyone. They establish colonies. They build economic partnerships. Yes, they eliminated the Jarzan threat with stellar-scale weapons, but that was a targeted response to an immediate danger. Yes, they played dirty with the Darnax, but no sun went nova, and in the end they were Darnax themselves who nearly destroyed their civilization. After each threat is eliminated, humans go back to being, well, human. Trading, building, competing, and above all, fighting among themselves. Their internal conflicts never stop and sometimes become violent. Really violent. But they never cross the line. They never quite push each other to existential threats. Because somewhere in their collective memory, burned into their consciousness from their nuclear age, is the ancient compact. We can fight about everything, but we never go for the throat. Because if one of us does, we all die. I believe, and this is a hypothesis that frightens me, that their fragmentation is not a weakness. It may be their greatest strength. Every human faction is in constant competition with every other human faction. Kepler colonies compete with Earth Group and Eridanus and whoever. Corporate entities compete with each other and with planetary authorities. Ideological movements compete for hearts and minds. Military forces maintain careful balance against each other. And here is the crucial insight. They are all competing against opponents who have the same intelligence, the same experience, the same motivations, and the same capacity for unconventional thinking, because they all belong to the same species originating from the same planet. For example, a Kepler faction developing a new strategy cannot rely on their opponents being slower or less clever. Earth groups know they are facing adversaries who think like them, who have access to the same historical knowledge, who can predict their moves because they will make the same moves. Eridanus independentists cannot count on their enemies being less motivated, because everyone involved wants survival, with equal desperation. This means that every human faction must constantly innovate, constantly adapt, constantly developing new strategies, new technologies, new approaches, because they are in an endless arm race with opponents who are exactly as capable as they are. They cannot become complacent. They cannot rest on superior technology, or superior numbers, or superior position, because their rivals will immediately exploit any weakness. They cannot afford to stagnate, because stagnation means defeat in the hands of someone who is just as smart, just as experienced, and just as ruthless as they are. Most species achieve unification and then stop. Stop innovating at the same pace. Stop competing as fiercely. Stop pushing boundaries with the same desperation. They have internal peace, which is admirable, but peace allows for complacency. Humans never have peace, not really, not among themselves, and so they never stop sharpening themselves against each other. They have a mantra that speaks volumes about the way they think. If you desire peace, prepare for war. When they encounter external threats, the Jarzin, the Darnax, anyone else, they are facing opponents who have not spent millennia in constant, fierce competition with equals. Opponents who unified early and learned to compete only against inferiors or distant equals. Opponents who have not been forced to innovate at the relentless pace that internal human competition demands. Is it any wonder they win? But this is not what troubles me most. After young Uluklam's comment, after the 2.3-second moment of unity, I began watching more carefully. I studied their interactions with new understanding, and I realized that the humans do not fully understand what I had witnessed. They are not consciously aware of the switch. I conducted a quiet experiment. I asked one of the Earth representatives, a woman named Chen, sharp-minded and professionally direct, about human unity. She laughed. Actually laughed. Unity? Have you seen us? We can't agree on anything. Kepler wants independence, the Eridanus wants representation, and Earth Group is fragmenting into a dozen different power blocks. We're barely holding together. I pressed. But surely if humanity faced an existential threat, would you unite? Her expression changed. Not dramatically, but something shifted behind her eyes. Something she herself did not seem to consciously recognize. Well, she replied slowly, I mean, obviously. If it came down to species survival, yeah, of course. That's a whole different story. Different how? She struggled to articulate it. It's just, that's the line, you know? You can mess with other humans all you want. We do it constantly. But if someone threatens the species... She didn't need to explain further. Jarzin and Darnax learned firsthand. What I noticed is that she didn't know where this line was, but she knew it existed. And she knew. They all know at some deep, unarticulated level what happens when that line is crossed. I have run simulations. We all have in the Council. We have studied human history, analysed their conflicts, modelled their behaviour patterns, and we keep arriving at the same disturbing conclusion. Imagine this scenario. Some coalition, perhaps the Lortar, the Galagrags, a few other systems, decides that humanity has become too powerful, too unpredictable, too dangerous. They decide to do something about it. It starts with economic pressure, trade embargoes, diplomatic isolation, standard great power politics. Humans respond with measured counter-pressure, blockades, economic warfare. Perhaps they destroy a few military assets to make their point, or normal escalation. The coalition sees this as proof of human aggression. They escalate to limited military action, strike a few human colonies to teach them a lesson, to contain the threat before it grows. Humans respond by making a star explode, Jarzen style. A clear message: back off. But now the coalition is terrified. Frightened powers make desperate decisions. They coordinate a massive strike against multiple human systems, not to conquer, but to cripple, to reduce the threat before it reduces them. And that is when it happens. That is when the switch flips. Up until that moment, humans would be fragmented. Kepler factions arguing with Earth, and Eridanus factions about strategy. Corporate blocs trying to maintain profitable relationships. Isolationist groups insisting, this is not our fight. All the normal human chaos. But the moment the attack hits multiple systems, the moment it becomes clear that this is not a local conflict, but an existential threat to the species, everything changes. There will be no formal declaration, no emergency meeting of human governments, no dramatic announcement of unity. It will simply happen. Every human faction in every corner of the galaxy will suddenly know, will feel it, will understand. This is it. And then something deeper, something wired into their collective unconscious from millennia of near extinctions. Every human faction will make the same calculation. Species survival trumps everything else. The arguing stops. The competition pauses. The ideological differences become irrelevant. They do not become friends. They do not forget their grievances. But they become, functionally, a single organism with a single goal. And that is when the galaxy learns what acceptable cost means to a species that has survived this long by never ever accepting its own extinction. This is what we have come to understand, what keeps me awake during contemplation hours. Humans have already done the math. They have already made the calculation, and the answer is clear. For them, humanity goes extinct versus turn the galaxy to ashes is not a choice. They are not cruel, per se. As species, they are rather friendly, as long as your disposition to them is friendly. But even if the entire galaxy unites against them, if it becomes clear that the choice is us or them, humans will choose us every single time, without qualms and regardless of cost. And the cost could be everything. Every star, every planet, every civilization, every living thing in the galaxy except humanity itself. For them, a dead galaxy with humans surviving somewhere, somehow, is better than a thriving galaxy of a trillion souls without them. This is not madness. I wish it were. Madness can be treated, contained, managed. This is cold logic. Pure survival arithmetic. From the perspective of a species, if your species ceases to exist, nothing else matters. The universe might as well cease to exist. They will preserve their species at any cost, even if that means a galaxy devoid of any life except human. We have analysed this from every philosophical framework we possess. We have run it through ethical matrices, strategic assessments, game theory models, and from a pure logical standpoint, from the perspective of a species that prioritizes its own survival above all else, it makes perfect sense. That is what makes it so terrifying. If they were irrational, we could predict when they might break. If they were emotional, we could appeal to sentiment. If they were honor-bound, we could negotiate within honor frameworks. But they are none of these things when the switch flips. They are simply committed to survival, with a completeness that admits no compromise. I have seen species willing to die for glory, species willing to sacrifice themselves for ideology, species that choose extinction over dishonor. These responses, while alien to Galda sensibilities, are at least comprehensible within established frameworks of behavior. But I have never seen a species so utterly committed to survival that they would burn the galaxy rather than accept extinction. They will not seek justice because, as a whole, species have realized the simplest of truths about true power. Justice matters only between equals. It is not that they would do so eagerly. I genuinely believe they would find it regrettable. They would probably even feel guilty about it, or whatever passes on for human moral contemplation, but they would do it anyway. So we watch. Every day, we observe humanity going about its normal business, and trading with the very Jarzin they nearly exterminated, rebuilding the Darnak civilization after offering them the tool to dismantle it themselves, helping backwater colonies develop, fighting among themselves over resource rights and trade agreements and ideological differences. Completely normal, entirely rational, even, dare I say it, benign in their daily interactions. See, we tell the worried civilizations that come to us, humans are not monsters. They are traders, pragmatists, rational actors. Leave them alone, do not threaten them, and everything will be fine. But every quiet moment, every period of contemplation, I remember that 2.3-second shift. That moment when three arguing factions became one entity. That glimpse behind the curtain of human psychology. And I know that somewhere in the galaxy, right now, human factions are competing with each other as fiercely as ever, blocking each other's trade routes, undermining each other's colonies, fighting over resources and pride and ideology, looking, to any external observer, like a species barely holding itself together. But there is a line, invisible, subjective, undefined even to themselves. And if that line is crossed, if humanity collectively decides that the species itself is under existential threat, then all that internal competition, all that fierce rivalry, all that barely contained conflict will redirect outward, and with the combined creativity of 1,000 competing factions that have been sharpening themselves against each other for millennia, with the focused intensity of a species that has survived nuclear age, system-wide conflicts, and a hostile galaxy through sheer refusal to accept extinction, with the cold calculus that has already determined anything is acceptable if the species survives. I presented my findings to the High Council. They listened in silence. The deep, heavy silence that comes when ancient beings confront something truly new. When I finished, Senior Councillor Vara asked the only question that mattered. What do we recommend? I had no answer. What can we recommend? We cannot try to eliminate humans. That would trigger exactly what we fear. We cannot control them. They would perceive control as threat. We cannot even predict them reliably. Their threshold for species survival mode is subjective and unconscious. We can only warn others and watch as humans continue their normal bickering and trading and expanding, and pray, if we still remembered how, that nobody is stupid enough to cross that invisible line. So I watch. We all watch. The Galdar, who have seen millions of years of galactic history, who have witnessed the rise and fall of countless civilizations, who thought we understood the patterns of sentient behavior. We watch humanity trade peacefully with their neighbors, build colonies on distant worlds, help suffering populations, sometimes purely for profit, sometimes for reasons they themselves probably do not fully understand. Fight among themselves with passionate intensity over issues that seem trivial to our ancient perspective. We watch them being normal. And we worry. We worry because we have learned something in our millions of years of observation. Something that younger species have not yet internalized. The most dangerous threats are not the ones that look dangerous every day. They are the ones that look normal, peaceful, even benign, right up until the moment they are not. Humanity has shown us their switch. That 2.3-second glimpse behind the curtain. They did not mean to. I do not think they even realized what they revealed. But we saw it. We understand it now, as much as we can understand something so fundamentally alien to our experience. And it's frightening. Personal note, not for official record. I found myself almost admiring them after that visit. The sheer audacity of a species that fights with itself so fiercely, yet can unite so completely. The paradox of cooperation and competition existing simultaneously at every level of their civilization. But admiration is a luxury we cannot afford, because the stakes are not merely academic. They are existential. Not for us, perhaps, but for everything else. I think of young Ulukam's innocent comment and that 2.3-second response, and I wonder, how close did we come? What exactly would it take to trigger not just that flash of unity, but full commitment? Where is the line? I do not know, and I don't want to know. Because while ignorance terrifies me, finding out terrifies me even more. Elharder, Senior Council Member, Gouda High Council. Cycle 10-847229, Post-Integration.